What can an attacker do with your password? How can they hack it? We're going to be covering that in this video on password attacks. Now, they start off by explaining what a password is. There's a lot of considerations in this room that I want to really highlight that they don't mention, because I feel if you are a beginner going through this room, it's going to be very valuable, of course, for you. But there are certain things that they mentioned that can be a little bit misleading, I think. I'll just put it that way. So I'll draw attention to them as they come up. Now, one thing that they talk about here very early on is that, you know, attackers can use common seen passwords in order to compromise your account. So a lot of people think like, oh, well, I have, you know, this password here that is not a common password. Well, here's the thing as well, right? If you use this password on any site that is then breached, and there's a breach on that site, and they dump the database, and they get the hashes, and they get the password somehow, right? Well, chances are your password, even though it might be complex, is part of some of these word lists that attackers are using and selling on the dark web and things like that. And so that's something you really want to consider as well. Is it's more than just having a complex password. Also, you got to make sure that that password has not been, you know, not shown up in a breach somewhere. And there's different tools you can do online, to use online to check for that. But of course, those are not going to be 100% accurate either, because they're only going off the intel that they have, the ones that are those password lists that are known out there. But definitely not using a password like this, you know, using special characters and all that stuff is really important. And it's not just about password length. If you have like Bible verses or things like that, like long sentences, then it is a lot easier for an attacker to guess that through a word list or something like that, or maybe just blind guessing it. And those are the things that I wanted to highlight here early on. Now, if you are taking my Active Directory pen testing course right now, maybe it's still available depending on when this video is going out. I guess it depends. I'm not sure when this will be up, but one thing you'll notice in an Active Directory environment is that it is really crucial that you use strong passwords, even more so, because on a lot of these attacks where you know responder or whatever, they get your service ticket, your Kerberos ticket. Well, if they can't crack that ticket, then it's of little to no use to them. So that's why it's so important. You know, even with Kerberosing, they get the service ticket of the service account. If they're not able to crack that ticket and get the password, then they can't complete the Kerberosing attack against the service. So it's important, whether this is just for your own personal security or Active Directory, whatever the case may be, just having a stronger password will do probably more for you in terms of making you more secure than anything else you could really do. I don't want to speak in absolutes like that, but it is one of the, let's just say it is one of the best ways that you can harden yourself. I'll put it that way. So next thing they go into is explaining the difference between password cracking and password guessing. The short version here is that password guessing is when you're using online protocols and services, you're brute forcing them. So you're brute forcing like a web login or something like that, or SSH or some kind of service over the network. Whereas password cracking is where you have hashes and you're cracking them locally on your own system, and it's not generating any network traffic, basically. And yeah, don't use default passwords or leaked passwords. This is what I was saying earlier. I won't spend too much time on that. We talked about that quite extensively. But yeah, you can see how you can combine word lists and do some crazy things like that. I'll definitely leave this room for you guys to try. I just want to highlight some of the differences here. I'm not going to do the actual password attacks in this video because it could take quite a long time to just sit there and wait on the word list to complete. The best way is to have this as your recon in the background if you're on a pen test. They also talk about a tool that I haven't used prior to this room called GITHUB. And they talk about the key space technique. I've used Crunch before. You can generate every possible combination of certain characters, as you can see here. And you can specify, different character sets here as well. And yeah, here's the GITHUB thing, the Common User Passwords Profiler, which is pretty interesting. So if you know details about a specific target, such as their birth date, pet name, company name, etc., this is a tool that will help you generate passwords based on that information. So that is actually some pretty cool stuff. Perhaps something I'll be making use of in the future. You have a whole kind of menu where it will ask you questions and then generate the word list based on that. So really cool stuff. And then they get into some dictionary and brute force attacks here. So here's something interesting, right? So they say the dictionary attack is a technique used to guess passwords by using well-known words or phrases. And here's one of the things that I want to highlight. They make a very key distinction between dictionary attacks and brute force attacks. And technically they are correct. They are different, right? Brute force is a common attack used by the attacker to gain unauthorized access to a personal account. This method is to guess the victim's password by using sending standard password combinations. The main difference between a dictionary and brute force attack is that a dictionary attack uses a word list that contains all possible passwords. So this is the key distinction that they make that is technically correct, but I will tell you that when we're talking from pen tester to pen tester in this industry, we normally use brute force attacks interchangeably. So what they're calling a dictionary attack, a lot of people would also refer to as a brute force attack. Usually anytime you have a word list and you're trying a bunch of combinations, whether that is based on a dictionary or just all possible combinations, synonymously, usually we refer to this as a brute force attack. So that's just something I wanted to highlight. If you're a beginner, in the industry, from what I've experienced at least, maybe your experience is different, but what I've experienced is that we've used the term brute force synonymously in both of these cases. Most people don't make this fine distinction here, but it is good to know. And then going to the offline attacks, we have some rule-based attacks. So with John, you have different rules, and you can really get in depth with this. A lot of times in CTFs, at least from my experience, I haven't had to go too in-depth in the rules, but this is definitely something good to know for real world and things like that, and ways that you can apply these different things. Or maybe if you're doing a more advanced CTF, you might have to make use of these custom, maybe even custom rules, right? But there is a lot more power to John than what a lot of people use it for in CTFs, which is just, hey, run, here's the hash, run it against rocku.txt. There's a lot more you can do with John. And Hashcat as well. And then they have a VM that you can deploy and test out some of these attacks. Cool is one that you'll find very useful. What it allows you to do is take text on the page and generate a word list based off that. And you can actually have it crawl the different links to go to different pages, and you can specify a minimum word length. So I believe here, anything that's at least 8 characters long, it will add to the word list. And so it will automatically dynamically generate a word list for you based on the text on the page, and that can be very helpful in your brute forcing. Now, another thing that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that this room is part of the red team path, right? And the thing is, most of the time in a red team scenario, you do not want to be doing brute force attacks or dictionary attacks like this. The exception is if it's an offline attack, because like I said, that generates no network traffic. You're not going to get caught during a brute force of a password hash offline, because you're going to be doing that on your attacker controlled machine, as they mention here. So this is like one of the exceptions where, yeah, it's fine, completely fine to do a dictionary or brute force attack, but you don't want to be doing these, what do they call them? The password guessing techniques on a red team engagement, because that's going to generate a ton of network traffic and you're going to stick out like a sore thumb in most cases. So that is the furthest thing from what you want to do on a red team. So it's cool that they covered this stuff, but I wish they would have pointed that out in this room. I didn't notice them pointing that out anywhere. You don't want to be doing that. Maybe they cover it in the password spray section, but password spraying would be a much better option in a red team scenario. And the key difference, as they mentioned here, is that with a brute force attack, what you're doing is you have a list of you have one user typically, or maybe multiple users, but usually one user, and you're trying a word list of different passwords to try to brute force that account, find the password to that account. Well, the password spray is the opposite. You have just one password, and you're spraying that across a list of users to see if any user is using that password. So here you could see the attacker is they're spraying the spring 2021 password across all these different accounts, and he gets a hit on this this poor lady here, and he gets access to the server in that way, or whatever application's running on it, whatever the case may be, right? And so this is a much better option because, well, not even just from a stealth standpoint, depending on what the security mechanisms are on what you're brute forcing, you could lock out those accounts. So even on a pen test, you might want to be careful about doing a brute force attack, because if there's any kind of password lockout policy on whatever you're brute forcing, then you could lock out those accounts. But if you're on a pen test and it's like basic auth or something like that, where you can be confident there's no lockout, then yeah, go ahead, brute force away. But yeah, you want to consider that as well, even in a pen testing scenario. But yeah, typically the password spray is a much better option in red teaming. This still generates a decent amount of traffic, so keep that in mind. It is a little bit harder to harder to identify you than a brute force attack, but it's definitely, you're opening yourself up to some risk anytime you do any of these attacks, including the password spray. So keep that in mind going forward here. But yeah, you can see ways to do this with Hydra, doing it against RDP and Outlook and all these things, SMB, and you can get some practice on it with the VM they have. So yeah, hopefully this one was of help to you guys. Let me know what you think of this series so far down in the comment section below. I believe the next one we'll be tackling in this series is on phishing. So things are getting more interesting. They're heating up a bit. And yeah, really excited to bring that video to you. But in the meantime, if you want to watch some technical content, I have that on the screen for you right now. I'll see you guys right over in those videos. And thanks for watching.